I feel as a follower of Jehovah, it is my duty to speak about the situation in Palestine and Israel. I find it shocking that most Christian channels have not spoken about this at all. From my knowledge, I have not seen any Christian channel speak about it. I had to think to myself, do they know about the situation? Or maybe they do know, and they have been given only so much information about it for them to even touch the subject and backlash to what might be said to them if they speak about the situation incorrectly. So on behalf of all my Christian brothers channel, I feel this is the safe way to speak about what's happening out there. I'm going to play a full clip by Russell Brand for his take on it, which I feel should be ours.
Before you watch this video, I want you to know that in the last few days I've had conversations with very high profile figures on this subject as part of my podcast, Under the Skin. Excerpts from those conversations on the matter of Israel and Palestine will be released over the next week. If you're dissatisfied with anything that I've said or feel that I haven't represented where you sit on this spectrum correctly, please be patient and wait for these videos, because these people understand the issues much better than I do and speak very articulately from very different sides of the spectrum. Thank you. People have been asking me to comment on the situation in Israel and the conflict between the people of the Gaza Strip, the Palestinians, and the people of Israel. And the reason I haven't is because I've been sort of doubtful that I've got anything positive to add to what seems like a situation that is defined by polarity and intransigence. There are many people who focus on the disparity between means of the two sides of combatants in this conflict. There are other people that focus on the disparity in the deaths between the sides and the human rights issues suffered by Palestinian people and the historical problems. I feel like it's such a complex and challenging problem, such a challenging issue, that by getting into it, when people ask you even to do a video, what they're really saying is come out on my side, speak on my behalf. And I feel like as a person over here in England, and the role of the country I'm from in creating this situation historically is a sort of an important and an unhealthy and pretty tainted one, I feel like I don't have anything particularly positive to offer. I wonder sometimes what would happen if you could exempt the situation from history, from the trauma and pain of history, and look at it objectively. Of course, people from Israel and supporters of Israel say that fundamentally Hamas want to obliterate the Israeli state, and you can't negotiate with people with that kind of agenda, and that Israel is uniquely critiqued and held up to a standard that other nations or other states aren't held to. And again, because I feel like I know people across the spectrum of opinions with regard to this issue, I feel like just sad about it. You know, like I was with my children on Saturday and I ended up going past and for a moment being in a pro-Palestine protest. And, you know, I support, of course, anybody that wants to end conflict, that wants to find a peaceful solution to this ongoing, tragic, sad, historically complex problem. But I suppose what I feel is, like, what would you have any individual do other than say, can we find forgiveness in our hearts? Can we move forward? Can we look for things we have in common? Can we find love together? What are most people going to say? Oh, that's hippie, that's unhelpful. You obviously don't know anything about the history of this situation. You're asking people to forgive people that have murdered their children. You know, even when you touch upon the disparity between deaths on the sides, you know, the 250 in this latest round of the conflict, Palestinian people, including tragically, heartbreakingly, ridiculously children, and 12 Israeli deaths, a smaller figure, but 12 lives ruined, one child killed among them. What is there in this issue that can bring anything other than sadness? How can any situation be resolved unless the people that are entrenched on either side are willing to change. And of course, even if you say something like that, people on both sides are, well, we've tried to change, we offered this deal. Yeah, well, we tried to change, we offered this deal. Makes me feel like, what can you do? What can you say? Is there I'd like anyone watching this video now sort of like poised above the keyboard, ready to comment, no, but you're not considering this, you're not considering that. What possibly could I have said other than I unreservedly support your side in this situation? I offer no compassion to people of either side with regard to their particular perspective. Like, what kind of mind of God, what kind of pure and perfect consciousness is required to understand the bloodshed and suffering on both sides of this, the deep historical roots of this conflict, the bureaucratic and geographical idiocy and complexity of the construction and military conflicts that have ensued in the years since the establishment of modern Israel and where we are right now. Who is able to comment on what has happened to the displaced Palestinian people, or their suffering that goes on in Gaza, or the kind of conditions that give rise to terrorism, or the history of states like America, the United Kingdom, France, and the legacy of our colonialism? Whose hands are clean? Who in the world is free to comment on an issue like this? And if I think really when you're saying do a video, you're saying take a side, then I think you're part of the problem. You're part of the problem, because in a way, what side is there? Is for me, these are the two sides: ongoing conflict, solution. And like, I would, if there were a side labelled solution, then I would be on that side. All you're likely to get from speaking like that is people saying that you're naive, you're ridiculous, you've not understood the complexity. Well, who has? Who in the world speaks on this issue in a way that both sides are able to find a commensurate ease with? Who? And until you have that, until you have a perspective where the people of Israel are able to go, yes, that's cool, we could do that, and the Palestinian people are able to say, yes, this would be acceptable, whether it's two-state, one-state, if like both sides of this argument require annihilation, if both sides of them require some form of vengeance, then how could there possibly be a solution? Who would you imagine could come up with something novel, original, and helpful? I suppose a better objective, rather than the giddy, somewhat aspirational goal of finding some kind of solution to this intransigent historic problem, would be, are we able to have a conversation? And even beyond an issue like this one, which is, for as long as I've been alive and obviously for thousands of years, been contentious, we now find ourselves unable to talk about a subject as seemingly innocuous as wearing a mask or having a vaccine or support for particular civil rights issues, or the types of language that can be used, or people's rights to pursue this kind of lifestyle. All of these things now are caught in a miasma of conflict. If I could advocate for one thing, it would be an end to polarization, to recognize that all conflict takes place in the temporal space of this limited individual experience that we're currently undergoing. It's all taking place in culture, a construct. No one knows what's real. No one knows what God is. All of us know that murder, bloodshed, violence are wrong. All of us know that there is only one outcome when the means that are pursued are militaristic and violent. Ongoing violence. Violence begats more violence. And until we're able to bring a transcendent and spiritual perspective to this issue, all anyone can do is sit back and feel sorrowful about the ongoing sadness. If anyone's got a suggestion of like, no, this is what we could do to resolve the situation in the Middle East, God knows I'd love to hear it, but there's probably other places you should take it before the comment section on this video. And if what you're interested in is new means, methods for communicating, then yeah, keep me involved in that, because I believe that this is a time for clarity, transparency, openness, acceptance of one another's differences, not only with this complex, historical, challenging and difficult issue, but with the lesser issues that dominate so much of our time and cultural space now. How can we find ways of getting along with one another, allowing people to be different, allowing people to hold their own views, trying to create conditions in which we can live peacefully side by side, not aspiring for utopia or perfection, but for God's sake, something better than this.
I also want to talk about Abby Martin for bringing attention to the situation out there, and the Redacted Tonight channel. Here are the links to their videos speaking about the current situation at hand.